TSR in 1980, it was as an editor, because Tom Mulvey had the designer job. So I was put to work on various routine editing products, and one of them was this new module Gary had written to be in the basic set. We were using Mike Carr's Search of the Unknown, but Gary wanted to write something different and take it in a different direction. So he wrote this thing called Keep on the Borderlands, which, as I went through and editing it, quote unquote, because he told me don't change anything unless it's just a misspelling, I did find that there was no chapel, even though there was, even though there was a cleric in it who was in the keep. He had no church. So I wrote up a suggested chapel for the thing and sent it over by interoffice mail. Everybody else in the design editing offices said, well, it's been nice knowing you. You've been here 3 months, but nobody does that with Gary. You don't screw with Gygax stuff. But lo and behold, it came back again by interoffice mail that, yep, forgot one. This looks good. Use it. So part of the Keep on the Borderlands is my writing, my first published writing at TSR. A couple months after that, I won the DM competition, which I think it's Dragon number 41, has a picture of me, the top dungeon mentor and all that noise. Very young me with a terrible shirt in the photo, and that's when they asked me to start the RPGA. So I did that for about 1.5 years, and in the course of that wrote various adventures for RPGA tournament use, one of which was published in the I-Series. Needle is that one. The other modules that we actually published through the RPGA, R1 through 4, were then later combined into the Egg of the Phoenix module, I-11. Although Paul Jacquet is an outstanding author and illustrator who did so much for Judges Guild over the years, was not allowed to talk to me, because when that came out, I was with Gary at New Infinities after Gary had been forced out of TSR and I had left. So they weren't allowed to consult with me, so I didn't like the way that ended up, because they were just not allowed to talk. They wanted to talk to me, but they weren't allowed. In addition to that, while I was at TSR, I did various things advising the legal department on what third-party publications might infringe on the rights unique to D&D, certain creature names and things that were absolutely made up and unique and proprietary to TSR. So it's in part my fault why some companies got sued. I didn't recommend we sue them. I just said these are definitely infractions based on my expertise in AD&D and D&D. I advised the TSR legal department on some licensing. We had a big licensing boom in 83, 84. LJN Toys produced little bendable D&D monsters, character types, articulated figures, bunch of other like beach towels. I mean, all sorts of D&D licensing. All of that went through my approval, personally. I represented Gary in that respect because he didn't have time. He was focusing on the bigger picture. I was commissioned, or selected, actually I volunteered, to write 2001 A Space Odyssey, the science fiction classic by Arthur C. Clarke, and spoke with Dr. Clarke, or I guess it's Sir Arthur, not Doctor. May he rest in peace. That hit me when we lost Arthur. But I actually spoke with him briefly at his home in Sri Lanka when I was preparing to write the game version of that. I was honored and mega fanboy in my case, you know, just to be able to talk to the guy just once. Did talk to Isaac Asimov and some other writers I admired. But anyhow, in passing, in the game context there. So I did a little bit of science fiction, a little bit of fantasy, a little bit of this and that, some tournaments, some stuff for publication. My big project was the box sets of rules for the D&D, what they now call 4th edition, counting from the very beginning with OD&D. Or original D&D. So the 4th edition is mine, with the basic expert, companion, masters, and immortal sets, later combined by Aaron Alston on a straight contract basis into one massive rules cyclopedia for reference. Because if you recall, I wrote the basic set as a programmed learning instructional product, which means, by definition, it sucks to go back and look for rules in it. It's not written as a rules reference. So the Rules Cyclopedia, designed as a reference to the rules I wrote, has worked wonderfully, and about 95% or more of that is my work. Various other minor things, articles in Dragon magazine, and so on and so forth along the years there, until Gary was forced out in '85 while I was trying to finish up Immortals. And I asked him if I could come with, and he said, no, hang tight until I holler. So I kept working on various things and wrapping things up. writing RPGA tournaments and things. Until in '86, Gary called and said, okay, we're all set, and invited me and Kim Mohan, editor of Dragon Magazine and the top dog in the whole Dragon publishing hierarchy, and the legendary author Dave Cook, who's, I guess I would have to say I admire him the most of everybody at TSR other than Gary as a writer and creative force. Zeb had a wife and kid to deal with, and Kim and I didn't. So he stayed with the security and the insurance and TSR, the bigger company, and Kim Mohan and I joined Gary at New Infinities. And the idea there was, unfortunately, since we couldn't do D&D products, we could, however, do something similar to what many other companies were doing, producing D&D compatible. For example, Mayfair Games and their Rolaids line is compatible with AD&D. Sometimes, depending on which lawyers they had, they were allowed to mention that on the cover. Sometimes they weren't, but it all worked out okay. So we did something similar to that at New Infinities. We had the additional plus of being able to put on the product, this is approved and recommended by Gary Gygax. And we could legally provide Gary's credits, you know, co-creator of the D&D game, sole author of the advanced D&D game, author of these various many other things, books and adventures and so forth. That was our focus for a little while. Gary had ideas for what I called a B-movie game, Cyborg Commando. Aliens invade the Earth and we fight them back. My side that I contributed was, well, it's got to be a corny old B-movie plot. What if we do it in a hard science style and combine both soft fantasy science with the hard science crew and get both sides of the science fiction aisles and make it work as a role-playing game? So in practice, I wrote pretty much all of it, with some ideas from Gary, the start, and then contributions along the way, and a couple of bits added by Kim Mohan. He was busy, in turn, writing and editing with his wife novels to supplement the game, so that you could read fiction about this setup. You could play the game itself. Unfortunately, New Infinities was short on cash, and thus the guy they had hired as president, who is also, by the way, the first person ever inducted in the Role-Playing Hall of Fame, Don Turnbull, who had been running TSR UK for many years and so forth. He came over and was hired to be president of New Infinities. So we had these star power names, arguably. We had some real good products. Unfortunately, we didn't have enough money to do it right. And Don had to insist, for financial reasons, that we publish Cyborg Commando long before it was ready to be published, long before. So I had all these notes, and we cobbled it together so that if you really worked at it, you could kind of play some games at it, hoping to get then a second set out, riding on some of the revenue we got from the first one. Well, that's when we got hit with a lawsuit through a misunderstanding, in essence. What really happened with the module called The Convert that I wrote, a fantasy generic module, as I said, like other things we were publishing at the time. This was an RPGA tournament. So it was property of TSR. We asked TSR formally if they were going to publish it, and if not, whether we could. We got told, yes, you may publish it. We published it. They sued us for copyright infringement. In the process of doing this, I mentioned that you have to be very careful in the publishing world to do all the legal correct things. And what came out in the course of that interaction was that we had failed to get that in writing, a formal approval from them. So although they gave us verbal approval and said, go ahead and publish it, it was a trap because they hadn't given us the legal right. We were a new company. We should have known better because we had experience in the field, but we didn't have a good attorney on staff. We didn't have the money to thoroughly vet everything. And we had no argument with them. Of course this was a TSR item and an RPGA tournament. No, you don't have to go through all the noise to prove it. We admit it right up front. We'll stipulate it. But you gave us permission to prove it, and there it was, no, we couldn't prove that. So that was that. That drained off all the money, the little limited money we had, and so New Infinities ended up folding.